Wealth is not something that we can get more of in the future. It's only something that we can claim in real time in each and every moment. And when we make that a practice, when we make a practice of receiving and feeling the wealth that is available to us, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what's happening in the economy or what's happening in the world, then we become wealth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy. Today, we are going beyond balance sheets, investment returns, and the mechanics of wealth building, and straight into the heart of what true wealth really is. My guest is Ani Manian, entrepreneur, master coach, and the man many call the mind whisperer. Ani has worked with leaders across the spectrum, from multi-six-figure founders to billionaires. And his unique superpower is helping people uncover the internal architecture of wealth: ease, aliveness, authenticity, and connection to purpose. This episode is unlike anything we've ever done on the show. We go deep into the real source code that drives every financial decision you make, why so many high achievers can create extraordinary success but still feel empty, anxious, or disconnected, why wealth, real wealth, isn't a number, a liquidity event, or a portfolio size, but a state of being available to you right now, and how reframing your relationship with time, energy, and identity can unlock levels of freedom that no investment alone ever could. Ani breaks down why entrepreneurs are often born from childhood constraint, how our nervous system shapes our financial behaviors, and why most people postpone their happiness into the future, and how becoming fully at ease and fully alive is the true path to infinite wealth, internally and externally. This one is profound, it's powerful, and honestly, it may completely recalibrate how you think about your life, your goals, and the game you're playing. All right, deep breath, open mind, full presence, and now onto the conversation with Ani. Ani, welcome to the show.
Dave, thank you so much. You are one of my favorite human beings on this planet, because every time I talk to you, it just feels like an explosion of energy.
I'm really grateful for that, Ani, and it's mutual. And I am so excited to share some of your thinking and wisdom with the audience today, because I think, folks, you are in for a big treat. Because Ani is going to really help us think through, what does wealth really mean? What does living in fulfillment, being your best authentic self, really mean? Of course, we're focusing on strategies to build our wealth, but in the light of holistic wealth, what does that really mean? What does your game board really look like? And Ani has a very special gift. He's also known as the mind whisperer, and is going to share some of those philosophies with you today. So, Ani, it's such a distinct pleasure to have you on the show. And why don't we start the discussion talking a little bit about really, your genesis of, what was it that got you to be helping other people, really transform their lives? What was it along your journey? And frankly, what was your biggest learning lesson to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I will start with how I think about wealth, and then I'll connect it to how I got there. So most people, when they think about wealth, they think in terms of finances, in terms of money, in terms of, the economic aspect of it. And that is some sort of external representation of an internal feeling. And, I've worked with people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, all the way people who make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and even a couple of billionaires. And I've never met someone who didn't have a bigger number than what their bank account showed as a representation of what would allow them to feel wealthy. And for most people, wealth doesn't exist in the moment. It exists somewhere out there in the future. So they're separated from wealth in terms of space and time. And that's the Newtonian model, right? In the Newtonian physics lens, if we want to move an object from one point in space-time to another, we have to apply a certain amount of force. And that force is directly proportional to the mass of the object. And so if I want to become more wealthy, then the difference between my current net worth and, my future net worth will determine, for most people, generally the perception of how much effort I need to expend and how much time it would take me to get there. And that is what creates this fundamental sense of separation from this feeling of being wealthy. Because when we actually think about what wealth is a feeling, right? When someone tells me, I want to 10x my business, okay, great. Why? Because, if I 10x this thing, then I can sell it. And if I can sell it, I'll get this huge liquidity event. And if I can get this huge liquidity event, then, I'll finally be free. So over the past 15 years, with literally hundreds of entrepreneurs at all different shapes and sizes that I work with, everyone's chasing this feeling that lives in the future. And so growing up, I grew up very poor. I was suicidal at the age of 6. I was having a really hard time with life. And, at that early age, things were very challenging. And it just felt like it would be much easier to just opt out. And the last time I tried to kill myself at the age of 7, I was standing on the ledge of the building we used to live in. And I had this experience of this higher power, this higher intelligence that basically gave me this perspective, this insight, this vision that things didn't have to be the way they appeared for me. As in, something pierced through the way I was constructing reality, and it offered an alternate way to see things, to experience things, to construct things. And in many ways, that moment changed my life, because I realized that not everything I think, feel, believe, experience is real. And that's actually being constructed by my mind as a function of the things I've experienced, my environment, and all these things. And coming back to wealth, that experience basically led me into this quest of understanding what is this thing that everyone seems to be chasing that just wasn't around when I was growing up. I saw my dad working 3 jobs. My mom worked 2 jobs. My mother wouldn't buy herself clothes so that she could feed me and she could buy me books. I saw an extreme amount of financial scarcity, financial uncertainty. We moved, in the first 10 years of my life, we moved maybe 2 dozen times. And so things felt very uncertain, very unstable. And I could feel the scarcity and the fear and the lack of inner security in both my parents and also the people around us. And so I saw that everyone in the world is obsessed with this thing, that is money, that is accumulating as much money as possible and becoming wealthy. And this took me decades to realize and actually put a frame and definition around what wealth is, which is, to me, wealth is the feeling of being fully at ease and feeling fully turned on and alive. Most people, when they try to accumulate a certain amount of money in a bank account, or in terms of investments, or in terms of even, investments that passively yield a certain amount of money so that they don't have to think about active income because, their burn is covered. All those things, it's a proxy for one, a level of safety and inner security that allows them to feel at peace and at ease. And every human being is searching for this feeling of being fully at ease, because only when we feel fully at ease can we be fully in the present moment. only when we can fully be in the present moment can we actually be in connection with reality. And that's as simple as, when I wake up in the morning or when I go to bed at night with my wife and she is next to me and I'm feeling her body on mine and I'm feeling the bed and I'm feeling the softness of the sheets and the duvet, and can I fully be there and fully experience the goodness? Because only when I'm present do I have the capacity, the aperture to feel the goodness that is already here. The level of ease I have in my system determines the level of opening of that aperture, which determines how much goodness I can feel and receive. So the first aspect of being wealthy and feeling wealthy is how much ease can I experience? That ease is also the thing that allows us to be in the present versus being stuck in the past, reliving a memory, or being in the future where we're fantasizing, catastrophizing, or tensing and contracting and bracing for something that we don't want to have happen. Now, ease by itself is something that most people would love more of, but it took me reaching a full level of ease to realize that, the thing that the monks spend decades, realizing that everyone in the world thinks that when someone's enlightened and they've transcended, all the lack of ease and they're completely still and enlightened, that that's the goal. I realized that that's actually halfway to the goal. And so the goal, actually, it's a mathematical formula that requires one more piece on top of ease, which is full aliveness, which is full turn on, which is this level of engagement, of excitement, of energy, of passion, of creativity that surges through us, ideally in connection with, the vast infinite intelligence that makes the trees grow and, the birds sing, and, all this magic in the universe that exists and happens, and even the magic inside of us, right? We're 40 trillion cells in this body that somehow magically organize into a liver and a spleen and a brain. And somehow all of these things act in unison, almost like a symphony, and they form me and they form you. We're not doing that. So there must be a vast creative intelligence at play that makes all this happen. And when we connect to that vast creative intelligence and we are in connection with our source, which means we are resourcing, then this resource that is the energy that flows through us, and we become the conduit for the creation of the thing that we were put on this planet to create, because we're all vessels for creation. And we all have a unique blueprint. You are such a shining example of this, where you are in such deep contact and resonance with who you came here to be and what you came here to do, and the gift that you came here to channel from God to the people around you, to your community, to all the people who've met you, who've read your books, who've heard your podcast. You are a vessel, a conduit for that gift. And that, when you are in contact with that, you feel alive, you feel energized, you feel refreshed, you feel resourced, and it's magnetic. When people experience you in that state, they experience your highest state. When you experience yourself in that state, you experience your highest state. You feel absolutely amazing. So that is the second part of the formula. We want to feel fully at ease and we want to feel fully alive. We want to feel so deeply in the present that we're fully embodied. We're in our body, not in our heads, not worrying, not anxious, not bracing, not tensing, not contracting. And we're also fully engaged. We're fully engaged in the act of being who we came here to be, and fulfilling the purpose and the mission that we came here to fulfill. And that to me is wealth. It's so much more than a number. It's what the number will allow us to feel, and that is the mental projection. But we don't need to wait for a number in the bank account to feel this way. Actually, what I find is that it is our birthright to access this state in any given moment, regardless of who we are, where we live, how much money we have, what we've experienced, what trauma and problems have come our way. We have the birthright to experience real wealth on the inside. And when we experience that, and when we express from that place, that is actually the key to building real wealth externally. Because that is what channels our authenticity, our energy, our purpose, and turns that into currency. And currency is basically, it's a current, right? It's a current of energy. So the current of energy inside creates currency on the outside. And when we connect the way we generate currency, money, with who we're being, then there is no ceiling to how much currency we can generate. And that allows us to become infinitely wealthy, both on the outside and on the inside. And that is a completely different paradigm, not just to think about wealth and money, but also who we get to be along that journey, because we're winning in every moment, not waiting for a future where something will change.
Yeah, love it, Ani. That is probably one of the most thoughtful definitions of wealth that I've ever heard. And we have never had any guests really break it down in that manner. And so I'd like to really unpack this to the next level so that it can really become practical to the listeners out there. So I can see, right, if we break down the first level, right, you talking about basically being more at ease. And, you know, a lot of us have all kinds of challenges from childhood that we don't even know we really have. Our environments, our upbringings, you know, whatever those might actually be. And for most people, it actually creates this scarcity type of living, right? So I think, you know, this is why most people are searching for wealth. They're searching for passive incomes. They're trying to create that certainty, right, of ease in their lives is kind of, you know, one area. So that would be kind of, you know, one piece that I could see on the surface, right, in terms of it, at ease. And then as it relates to, you know, this area of being fully energized for yourself, right? I've heard that explained in different ways, whether that be your unique ability, your working genius, your flow state, right? I think all of these might be different ways to kind of articulate or having true purpose, right? I mean, some of these kind of things are kind of hitting around what you kind of really explained. So that being said, you know, what are the biggest challenges that people really have to really, you know, identifying this, you know, and then how can they actually make some forward progress?
That's a great question. And I'm going to break this down almost like in a very mathematical, but also deeply relatable way. Because, you know, I think of all these things as complex systems. So we are a complex system. And to be even more precise, we're a complex adaptive system. So complex because we are a system made up of subsystems, and adaptive because we're constantly changing and responding to our environment and to the inputs that we're getting. And we are living in relationship with lots of other complex systems, right? So our marriages are complex systems because now two complex systems are coming together to form a third entity that is our marriage. Our bodies are complex systems made up of other complex systems. And like that, that is sort of the architecture of the universe. Everything, you know, the lakes, the rivers, countries, these are all complex systems. Business is a complex system. And the reason why this is important to understand is because we have this very fixed, linear sense of who we are. And when we approach it from this fixed, rigid, monolithic, linear sense, then it locks us into a certain state. But actually, we're dynamic, we're adaptive, we're always changing and moving. But our perception gets locked into certain states. Now, here's why that's important. Let's look at this like a mathematical equation, right? If we think wealth or the most, highest level of presence and joy and well-being and happiness, all those things equal full ease plus full aliveness. Let's say that's our math equation. So let's take the full ease. What I find useful in a lot of these ideas is to actually invert first. So if full ease is our natural birthright, if you you have kids, I'm sure you remember when your kids were born and you held them, right? And when they were young and they were fully at ease, right? And when they weren't, because they soiled the diaper, they immediately let you know. And when they got changed or when they got fed, they came back to that state of ease. So ease is our birthright. It's always been there. It's always there underneath. It's like the sun that's shining that temporarily gets obscured by the clouds of our thinking or our perceptions or our beliefs or our triggers, our reactivity, but it's always there. It's always our natural state. So if we ask, well, what takes us out of ease? What causes us to be out of ease, right? Not fully at ease. And it's generally when we were young, we had an experience that we couldn't digest. So any experience that had a certain intensity to it, that exceeded our capacity to hold, we can think of that as an adverse experience or as trauma. Now, this doesn't have to be a big thing, the capital T trauma of, a 4-year-old gets abandoned or a 7-year-old that gets physically abused or something like that. It could be as simple as baby doesn't get picked up immediately by mommy when baby is crying. And this is before the baby develops a sense of self. So baby is just a nervous system that's sensing and feeling. And the subconscious of the baby is forming. And the message that the baby, the meaning the baby makes of what's happening, that mommy's not coming, that no one's coming, is that no one's coming. That baby doesn't have value. That love won't be there. That it's not safe for baby to be at ease. And so at different points in our life, we have these experiences that overwhelm us. And these things can be categorized in two ways. So things that were too much too soon, and that could be some kind of, emotional or physical abuse or, even a car crash or something like that, or too little for too long. So the absence of nurture, the absence of parental presence, the absence of security growing up, right? I had my share of all of the above, right? My dad was very intense and critical and physically abusive. And, he passed away a long time ago. And it took his death for me to realize that he didn't have the capacity to feel fully at ease. So how could he possibly be that for me? Right? So there's a quote, which is, trauma is passed from generation to generation until someone's bold enough to feel it. And so when we have these experiences that are overwhelming, that we can't digest, what happens is that because our system doesn't have the capacity to hold it, it gets rigid, it contracts. And that experience, that emotion that we can't hold, gets pushed down and frozen. And that shrinks our aperture. And when that keeps happening over the course of a normal life, we have, someone gets bullied at school, someone gets a D in the math exam, and the teacher gives a disapproving look that gets internalized as, I suck at this. All these things add up and they create a constriction in our experience. It creates a constriction in the nervous system. It creates a constriction in the psychological system. We form beliefs and perceptions and, all of these things around those, what I call impingements on our sense of self. And who we become actually as adults is the protective armor that we would have needed when we were young to actually keep ourselves safe. So we overcompensate and become the adult who we needed as children. Now that creates a separation between who we become and who we would need to be to feel this level of full ease, safety, security, and a level of well-being and presence. And so, a lot of my work is mostly with entrepreneurs, and most entrepreneurs have a lot of trauma in their childhood, or generally, one of their parents was some sort of an addict or alcoholic. And if, one of my favorite things is asking entrepreneurs what their number one core value is. 98% of the time, they say freedom. Think of the adult who grows up valuing freedom more than anything. It's very likely that that adult as a child experienced and lived in the opposite of freedom. So most entrepreneurs grew up feeling extremely constrained. They lived in some kind of a straitjacket of money, straitjacket of time, straitjacket of not enough love, not enough approval, not enough this or that. And so as adults, they become the overcompensatory version of that, right? So that's the lack of ease part. So when we can't fully be at ease and we can't, for us to come back to ease, we have to actually feel and digest those experiences that take us away from ease. And the way to do that is, to connect the adult self who has more resources and capacity with the child self who didn't, and create this integration that allows that energy to flow. We have some sort of an emotional process, and I'm oversimplifying it, but I really want to make sure that whoever's listening has a map for this. And that takes those fragmented parts of us and it connects them together. And now energy flows better through the system. And that is the state of health. Health is basically the flow of energy inside a system. Lack of health is when parts of the system become fragmented and there isn't integration or communication or exchange of information or energy happening. And if you notice, that's actually true for financial systems as well and economic systems, right? When there isn't money flowing through the economy, we say the economy is not doing so well. When there's lots of money flowing, and same thing with a business. And so that's why I love thinking about this from a systems perspective, because it explains everything. Now, the second part of this is the full aliveness. So if we invert that, what keeps someone from being fully alive? Well, the first thing is for us to feel fully alive, fully expressed, fully connected to our creative potential, fully turned on, right? What I call unreasonable turn on. Feeling turned on without a good reason to be turned on, right? Just waiting. We're at the airport. We just get notified that the flight's been delayed for 2 hours. And instead of letting that experience turn into frustration and impatience and now I'm stuck here, I find turn on even there, right? I have the capacity and the sovereignty to choose turn on in every moment without needing the circumstances to be different. So what keeps us from that? So for full turn on, first, we need to be fully authentic. Because if I'm playing a character that is not truly me, so that I can engineer safety, approval, control, belonging, or uniqueness, which is wanting to feel special. Those are 5 core deep psychological drivers. And I'm shapeshifting to be what other people or society wants me to be so that I can make more money, have the approval and the validation or all those things. Then I'm literally separating from myself. And when I'm separating from myself, I'm separating from source. When I'm separating from source, I don't have access to the infinite energetic creative potential of source, which means less energy is going to flow through my system, which means I'm not going to be fully alive. Almost like the current is going to drop, right? The voltage is going to drop. So the first thing we need is we need to be fully authentic, which also means we have to be following our soul's design or the blueprint, who we uniquely are, what we came here to uniquely do. And this is the secondary thing, right? First, we have to feel safe. First, we have to feel fully at ease. Then, when we are connected to ourselves, we're connected to our mission, our vision, our purpose, and we feel that connection to source, then the opening is as wide as possible and the flow of energy is as much as possible. And that's when we operate in this state that you mentioned, which is called the flow state, zone of genius, all these things. And the full amount of energy can flow through us. And that is also the healthiest state for a human being to be, because they've done a lot of research in terms of the neurobiology of the state. We're not only just more productive and more effective and make better decisions and more creative and solve problems better, but our cells are literally at their peak in terms of, their health and their vitality. Our relationships are amazing. We become better leaders, right? We become better visionaries. We become more effective at what we're doing. And so it's literally the one thing that is what I call God mode. And when we train our system to be in that state, first we have to go through this journey to touch that state and then practice and train to be in that state. Then instead of that just being an experience we touch once in a while, like the surfer who feels flow when they are out on the waves, it becomes our default state. It just becomes who we are naturally. It's not something we have to do. It just becomes who we are. And that's when it becomes wired into us and it just becomes a natural expression of how we exist. And so the flow state becomes a flow trait. And that is the most extraordinary way to live.
How would you relate this framework to self-actualization or consciousness?
Yeah. So, Maslow first thought that the highest level of human flourishing is self-actualization. And then later, actually, he realized that there's another state on top, which is self-transcendence. So I think the drive to self-actualize is the strongest drive in the human being. And that said, there is a hierarchy to things, right? So Maslow beautifully articulated that. If our animal body doesn't feel safe because we don't have shelter, or we don't have the resources to feed ourselves and clothe ourselves and take care of ourselves on a basic level, that need will supersede everything else. We're not going to be thinking about creativity. And that's why the work you do is so incredibly important, because what you're doing is you're putting a solid foundation underneath people's lives. Most people, they stand on quicksand, right? If someone stands on quicksand, they are going to feel unstable. They're going to feel not at ease, unsafe, insecure, because they're not standing on solid ground. They don't trust that the ground underneath them can hold them. So financially, when someone feels like that, it really limits how much responsibility they can hold, right? And that limits what they can create in this world and how much of an impact they can make even on their own life. What you're doing is you're helping people put a solid foundation underneath their feet. So now they're standing on solid ground. They trust the ground that they stand on internally, and that allows them to hold so much more. That allows them to have a much longer time horizon in terms of how their psychology operates. They're not thinking, how do I pay my bills this week? They're thinking in decades, right? So the longer our time horizon, the greater the level of safety in our system. That's why billionaires think in not decades, but they think in generations. So they think in 500-year increments. And people who are, on the opposite end, people who are really broke, they are thinking in terms of days or sometimes hours or minutes. And so that is one aspect of this, right? What comes up as I say that?
Yeah, well, I love the time construct that you just provided. I mean, that's really powerful right there. Because, whatever your goal is, you want to become a decamillionaire, a centimillionaire, a billionaire, whatever it is. The time gap to achieving that, right, is really interesting in terms of how you act today. Like, how present are you, how mindful are you today, but also having this bigger ambition, for a bigger future that's always greater than your past.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of money and time, that's a really interesting conversation because money is a deflationary asset, right? It's not even an asset, it's actually a currency. People mistakenly think of it like an asset, but time is an asset, and time is deflationary and money is inflationary, right? Because they keep printing more money. So as they print more money, the value of every additional dollar goes down over time as we age. But as we age, the total amount of time that's available to us is shrinking, especially relative to our total life. So the value of every marginal unit of time is actually increasing steadily. So those two charts are inverted. And so as we get older, actually time becomes more valuable than money. And most people are trading an inflationary currency for a deflationary asset, right? And I think we need to invert that trade to have the most amazing life. And that's why, again, your work is so pivotal, because when you allow people to, the whole time thing is just something I'm deeply obsessed with, because I had to train my brain to stop thinking in terms of money and start thinking in terms of time. So most people, they measure everything in money, but actually everything changes when we measure everything in time. So in terms of, let's say investing and having those investments yield a certain amount of money passively, we can think of that in terms of money, but then we can also think of that in terms of time, like how much time it gives back, right? When you think of taxes, and you do a masterful job of helping people, manage and reduce their tax burden, we can think of, like, let's say someone makes $1 million a year and they're paying, let's say, 40% in tax. We can think of that as $400,000, but we could also think about it as 5 months of time. And this is one of those interesting things where we're just wired to think about money as the most valuable and useful currency. But when we think about things in terms of time, then it becomes a very different conversation, because now I'm trying to extend my time horizon as much as possible into the future, because the runway I have in terms of time determines how much at ease and how much presence I can have in each moment, right? And that paradoxically allows me to trade my time for the most amount of money, or, which is even better. So most people are like, I'll trade my time for money. Great. Everyone starts there. Then the next level of the game is I trade my time to acquire skills, and then I trade my skills for more money. Great. But what's the next level beyond that? It's I trade my time to acquire skills. I trade those skills to acquire assets. And then I take those assets and I sell those assets for money. And then I take that money to buy back time. And so when I think about how do I create more time, and this is why an asset like Bitcoin is not really about money, but it's about buying time. Because what people are doing is that they're trading their life force for money, and then they spend that money, and then they have to go and spend more of their most precious asset, which is time and energy, to get more money. And most people will stay locked in that loop. But when we think about how do I get time back, then the equation becomes very simple, because I know that I have to take my life force and find a way to translate that into an asset that allows me to store time. And then I can withdraw from the account of time, and that's how I can be free.
That is just so spot on, Ani. And you've really pinpointed the underlying flaw that traditional Wall Street and financial planning really has, right? Which is it's all based upon this accumulation theory. So we're building up, we're trading our time for money for 40 years into some big nest egg that we hope we can then get some time back, at age 65, and then start to live our lives and be at ease, at that point, and have some energy at that point. Whereas this is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do, right? With this passive income type approach and creating, money that's actually flowing to you and working for you while you're sleeping, so that you can be mindful and you have time actually today.
Yeah, and to close that loop, the reason why what you're doing is so key in facilitating that in people's lives is that, first of all, no matter how wealthy someone is, they're still on some level operating in the wrong paradigm, right? Unless they've figured out how to be fully at ease and fully alive. To be fully at ease and fully alive, that also presupposes, and I call this getting paid to exist, that we're not doing something for the money.
Hey, it's Dave Wolcott here. Let me ask you something. Are you tired of the same old financial advice that leaves you spinning your wheels? If you're ready to discover the real secrets the ultra wealthy use to build unstoppable wealth, then I've got something just for you. My new book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy, is your ticket to learning the proven strategies that the top 1% don't want you to know. This book isn't just about money. It's about building a life of purpose, freedom, and lasting impact. And I want to give you a free copy. Visit holisticwealthstrategy.com and get yours today. It's time to level up your financial game and create the future you deserve.
0% of my life involves doing something for the money. I don't do anything for the money. I do the thing that turns me on, lights me up, and just fills me with an insane amount of energy and passion with the people who elicit the same response from me. And the economic reward is implicit and inherent in that. And that's the goal, right? Because when someone, let's say, has passive income coming in, when I think about it, I think about like two times monthly overhead. So if they're spending, let's say, $20,000 a month, they have $40,000 coming in every month passively without them having to do anything. Now, what are they going to do with their time? If you ask most people, and let's exaggerate it, so let's say they have 5x their monthly burn coming in passively. So they're spending, $20,000 a month, and they have $100,000 a month coming in without doing a single thing. Nothing needs to be done. No effort needs to be expended. No time needs to be sacrificed. 100 grand a month coming in automatically. What is this person going to do now? For most people, the answer is going to be different than what they're currently doing. Because currently, they're efforting and performing and doing things as a means to an end. They're trading these really extremely precious assets, which is their time, their attention, and their energy, all of which are finite. They're trading finite assets for something that is infinite. We think of money as finite and time and energy and attention as infinite, but it's actually the exact opposite. If there is a gap between what someone's doing now and what they would be doing when they have, let's say, 5x their monthly burn coming in automatically, passively, without doing a thing, then currently they're not getting paid to exist. They're performing, right? And so the reason why what you're doing is so profoundly important is that it gives people finally the choice to do the thing that they actually want to do, not do the thing that they think they need to do to make the money, and then to accumulate that money so that they can eventually feel safe and so that they can have enough overflow, which their mind will keep moving the goalposts, where they can finally do the thing that they actually want to do. And that's the crazy, like, to me, it's crazy because, even though this is completely normalized, because this is how everyone was programmed, when we actually think about it in the context of this conversation we're having, like, it feels like a crazy thing to do because we're taking the thing that is the most precious, right, for decades. You probably see people doing this for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, hoping that eventually they'll have the permission and the ability to be who they want to be, do what they want to do with the people they want to do it with. But they keep pushing it away, right? Because no number creates that internal feeling of safety, which actually would allow them to have the life that they want.
This is so gold. It's complete gold, Ani. And I think this is absolutely the biggest unlock for folks, in the audience, for all of us, really. And if you could only realize that every listener out there today, you are in the global 1%. People would kill to be in the position that you're in, but we all struggle with more, with not being fulfilled, with being too busy, with not being our true self, with hustle and grind, with all of these things that are, capturing our precious time and taking us more and more off course of what we should do. And I always recommend to people that the biggest advice that they could ever take is to invest in themselves first before they invest in anything else, because it's not going to be the size of your portfolio, that gets you there, right? It's going to be changing the entire paradigm and how you think. And as you pointed out, really becoming, more at ease with yourself wherever you are on the journey. Right. And it doesn't matter, what age you're in, what country you live in, what your background was. But right, we all need to seek this as humans. And that's the unlock, right? That's the unlock. And that's why just really grateful to have you here, Ani, to help people really understand that, because it's not apparent. And frankly, it's very counterintuitive. And there's not many people out there speaking in this manner. Most of the time, it's actually the opposite. 99% of the people are focusing on this accumulation theory or trading, right? Trading is the absolute worst. It's basically gambling. I don't care what asset class it is. It's like gambling, right? That's not going to get you your time or your security or ease. So this has been just such an enlightening conversation. And, I know we could go on and on about this. There's so many good pearls of wisdom here, but I think you've given
you've really shared with us, the essence of how to change how we really think about wealth. And so if you could just, to try to really make this actionable for everyone, what would be, one step that could move them closer towards this true definition of wealth?
I think the most profound thing I could share in that direction is realizing that we are inherently wealthy and claiming and receiving that wealth in every moment. And the way we do that is in the moment, not sometime in the future when the bank account says something else or when something happens in the business or whatever else. In the moment, coming to this place where we allow ourselves to come fully at ease and we open our heart and we think about all the things that we have right now in our life in this moment that we can feel profound gratitude for. Just a profound amount of gratitude for all the blessings that we already have. And just feeling those, thinking about all those people, all those things, all those experiences in the moment, right now, and connecting to the infinite blessings that our Creator has bestowed upon us. And when we connect to that, when we feel the gratitude for what we already have, we pass through this quantum tunnel into the state of wealth. Because wealth is not something that we can get more of in the future. It's only something that we can claim in real time in each and every moment. And when we make that a practice, when we make a practice of receiving and feeling the wealth that is available to us, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what's happening in the economy or what's happening in the world, then we become wealth. We become wealthy. And the best way to grow our wealth and our net worth is from wealth. Growing to wealth is actually much harder. It's Newtonian, right? It requires force, effort. It requires us to move through space and time. It defers it into the future. It limits us based on our past. But only in the present moment can we access the feeling of true wealth. And that's the feeling from which everything good gets to be created.
Amazing. Ani, where can people learn more about you, some of the coaching programs you have? I know you have a podcast as well. What would you like to share?
Yeah, animanian.com, ANIMANIAN. You can look me up on Instagram, on YouTube. I'm not as prolific of a content creator as you, but I I put up some stuff from generally like conversations like these, and in my work with people, because to me the magic actually comes out in the moment when I connect with extraordinary human beings like yourself, where some part of me connects to source, and the stuff just flows. And it's like that is the greatest privilege I have, is these conversations and these connections with some absolutely wonderful human beings who bring out these ideas.
Yeah, well, you're definitely walking the walk, right? Your experience is exactly as you articulated, and to be in this like enlightened state, I mean, what a gift, right? And it's a great model for all of us to really learn from. And appreciate the listeners. Thanks for tuning in today, and hope you got as much out of this as I did. I think some of these thoughts could really radically change your life, and really just changing your thinking. And especially as we kind of move into the holiday season here, do some deep thinking, right? This is really the hard work. but change some of the paradigm. Really, I would listen to this episode again. I know I'm going to, so you can really internalize it and then see what action steps you can take from there. Ani, thanks again. It's been such a gift, and really appreciate you.
Absolute honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Wealth Strategy Secrets. If you'd like to get a free copy of the book, go to holisticwealthstrategy.com. That's holisticwealthstrategy.com. If you'd like to learn more about upcoming opportunities at Pantheon, please visit pantheoninvest.com. That's pantheoninvest.com.